1, 2. Okay, 57, part 4 with Gabe Cruz. Good. Okay. Honey.
Yeah. Okay. So I had to write this down in between so I wouldn't forget here. This is I wanted to highlight this in particular because I think it's extremely important to take the fear off the table so we can troubleshoot more efficiently. I'm saying this because when I did the technical work, it's really easy when you're in that environment and you're trying to get like my job for the first 7 years when I did really serious like cell site work, I had to go to respond to emergencies. And where I worked, they considered that like if a site went down and you could not process calls on it, you had to respond and have that thing restored like in hours. Like there was no messing around. And sometimes you were on call for like 2 weeks at a time, and that sucked. And basically that just means that 24 hours a day for like multiple areas, you're responsible for responding in the middle of the night, driving up to some hill and trying to focus on troubleshooting, and it's really,
I was actually going to get a job just like that in the Midlands of England, but I couldn't get motivated.
Yeah, and that's the thing, so it's like, so you get a call like at 2 a.m. and you're like, you drive up to the top of this mountain and you're suddenly in the middle of, all this equipment, and what do you have? You have all these different frequencies, but you also have fans buzzing. You have, like shh. I mean,
air
it's
conditioning
everywhere from multiple sources, all different frequencies. You have all the different equipment in there, and like this doesn't even begin to tell you what it is. Like there's other ones too. Then you get into like microwaves, and then you got like 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, 10, whatever. I mean, there's so many different frequencies beyond that that the microwaves will operate in, and those are basically the way that towers will. So when the base station communicates, from the antenna down to the base, like if you're outside, your phone, it talks to that antenna, right? The antenna sends that signal down to the base station, and the base station is sending out a signal that's saying, talk to me and talk back to me, okay? And from there, once it's doing all that processing as far as doing your call, it has to route it back to somewhere else to send it to wherever it's going to beyond there, right? So I don't think we have to write that down per se, and it's bad in my box. So anyway, yes. Yeah, so it goes into like the brain, like I was telling you about, with all the different channel element cards and everything else like that, and the GPS unit, and it does all the timing. Well, from there, then it hops on it. There's a lot of different ways to do it depending on the tower, right? But one method is microwave, one method is fiber optics. That's really the main ones that are used, right?
Is that down to the choice of where the phone's talking to?
So yeah, so basically once the brain is there, right, the base station at the bottom of the tower, it has to talk back to something to get your calls to process. It's not like it's just sitting there by itself doing all the work. It has to go back to a central network. So that's why you have either microwave or fiber optics or whatever the case might be. There's a lot of different ways to do it. But nowadays, that's primarily what's used because you can fit more inside, they're, they're more spectrum efficient. So whereas, like the old days when you bought like a telephone circuit, you get like I can't remember what that is, like a 1.4 something. Anyways, like your data rate, I can't remember what it was on a T1. It was something like that. I don't know what there's different standards in Europe versus the US, but
I think you get a little bit more bandwidth on an American phone than you do on European phones.
Yeah, because
like I did 6 kilohertz of audio on it.
Yeah, I once did that as a project, converting AMI to B8ZS circuits, and that's why we did it. On I believe it was like on an AMI circuit, you had like 1.2, and then I think by going to B8ZS, it was 1.4. I can't remember what it is. Honestly, I've never been that good with that part because it wasn't what I focused on.
But anyway, there's music circuits and video levels and all sorts of high bandwidth stuff, and of course nowadays you're dealing with.
You're there troubleshooting. You have all these different types of signals and everything like that, including like the microwave, and that's what basically talks from the base station back to the central office. And so once it gets there, you have like a switch. It's more of like I don't know what's the best way to call it. It's sort of like the master brain, I guess, of sorts, for everything. It all goes to a regional brain, I guess you want to call it, like
or telephone exchange.
And then from there, it'll communicate to the other brains that'll route them down to the smaller brains that'll route them down to your cell phone.
I mean, are they in the same buildings as a conventional telephone exchange is?
Yeah, so they'll be these large, really plain looking buildings. I mean, they're usually not anything special. They're just they house like just racks and rows of the brain. That's basically it. I mean, honestly, it's if you watch the end of, well, not the end, but the part of 2001, with Hal and everything like that, and he's kind of wandering through. I mean, it's almost like our version of that in a sense. It's sort of like it's just row and row and row of just boring equipment with cards that you pull in and out. It's not that much more complicated than that. But it does all the processing of the traffic and handles all the capacity. So like the number of calls is all done there. Same for the base station. They can only handle so many calls at a time. And then at the main brain, they can only handle so many calls before needing an upgrade, et cetera, right? So, and I'm sorry, I just realized I drifted off here. So what's the core theme here that we're talking about? Well, so so there is something, so I'm talking about troubleshooting, right? So you're up there and you can actually see, like, I'm surrounded by a lot of these frequencies even now, and I'm actually on the third floor of my building, which I don't think helps. I think probably now that I've thought about it, a person like me should either be in a basement or
But why is that harmful?
Well,
I mean,
let me put it this way.
you're talking to all your other RF engineers.
Is it?
I mean,
I don't mean to say that it's harmful. I just mean for me specifically, right? I feel like for me, my core problem is that for me, I think that I have some type of empathic abilities that I just don't know what to call it. Okay. And my gut's telling me, and this is the messaging that I get. And again, like I question it constantly because I don't know the validity of that messaging, but it's like telling me basically like, yeah, like that's the problem, man. Like for people like you, this is effectively your human rights issue. You and people like you are going to be experiencing this phenomenon, and it's not to say that it's like people are doing ugly things to you. It just might be an issue that they don't fully recognize. Like people may not be aware that there are people out there that, they just function differently than you, and they don't respond as well to some of these frequencies. I mean, that's a huge super frequency compared to like back when I first started. I only worked on just this. Now it's all this. This is all surrounding me in most places that I go to. And in addition to that, I would have it strapped to my back. And you throw in 2.5 gig and all that other stuff like that, right?
Yeah, well, 2.5 gig specifically selected because it's the water molecule frequency, and that's why it cooks your microwave.
Yeah. So, at any rate, so you have this soup of frequencies, and honestly, this actually, I'm glad that. So you can't troubleshoot efficiently, right, when this is happening. So the bees, when they're dealing with that cell phone experiment I was telling you about, when they started, having weird patterns and stuff like that, it's not as if it completely killed them off. It's just that not all of them could adapt, and specifically the ones that were core to building the hive, right? The ones that really were the creators and that made the structure of the hive and communicating these types of patterns by interfering with that modulation scheme that they use to form these patterns, because they're so similar to what we use. They can't function in that environment properly unless they, that's just, here again, they're saying it. So in my mind, like if I had something, and this is how it hits me, dude. I'm getting hit so hard right now, even as I'm talking about this. They're telling me basically like, dude, this is what you need to be doing. They're saying, forget about the other nonsense. We want you to like really, really think about this. And if you have anything you can offer to the discussion, to offer it. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay.
So,
if they're trying to tell you something, just
yeah. So, but here's
speak
why.
it out.
Okay? They're telling me that they say to remember interfrequency hard handoffs and to remember that. And I'm thinking about that because here's the thing I want to talk about right here. All right. 450 and 150. Now, a lot of people aren't as familiar with those frequencies, right? But they're used in the United States for public safety. That's what we call it, public safety frequency. And again, people, don't take my word for it. And again, to those who think that this is like secret or anything else like that, all of this is publicly available, just to make that clear.
Those are the old lower...
Right, you can pull all this on the FCC.gov website. It's all available. This is why I think that as much as you can take off the table to be afraid of, don't let it be towers and their locations, because they're all on the website. Every tower is registered. Nobody's allowed to hide anything, okay? That doesn't happen. If it does, then they're fined. Wow, my eyes are getting hit really bad. I feel like I'm going blind, to be honest with you. This is awful. I got to get this out.
Okay, just keep talking.
All right. This is what I'm concerned about. I in my work, I deal with a lot of law enforcement, a lot of I've been in hospitals. I mean, a lot of what I do involves keeping the public safe. Okay, because they need systems that are reliable to communicate in hard to reach environments. And so one of the things that I do is I specialize in building systems. Okay, that's just kind of what I've been doing as a contractor. That's why I carry that backpack. It's because part of my job is to sort of fine tune those projects, optimize them, and stuff like that. So I became a lot more knowledgeable about frequencies in my experience during that time. So again, I used to be very, we call it in the States Fisher Price. I mean, like this is sort of almost like a toy network. It's not anything very complicated. And then when you start doing all this stuff, it's really complicated, really complicated. So I had to learn a lot fast. So I'm learning some of this stuff along with you here. But this particularly I didn't know about before. And I had to start dealing with that because some of the systems we have, they're called distributed antenna systems, right? And this is something that's all, you can look this up, DAS. They're specialized systems where if the signal like is dead in a basement, for example, and somebody wants the signal to get into the basement, they can request or install on their own a system called DAS. And they're also called BDAs, which is bidirectional amplifiers, digital repeaters. And there's a lot of different manufacturers of them. And again, this is all stuff that's commercially available, but primarily sold to carriers or people who have a license to install them. That's the key thing. If you want to install any of these systems, they have to be FCC approved and licensed. You're not permitted ever to run one of these devices without being FCC registered. Okay? So just in case people are concerned about the hidden thing, right? I just want to take that fear off the table while we're talking.
Well, if you're emitting RF, you need a license.
Yes, exactly.
That's something that I never did have a license.
It'll be if it's allowed to be there, it'll be licensed. That's what I'm telling you. And if it's not licensed, then it's not allowed to be there. Okay. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is because I had to learn about these frequencies more recently because this is what these systems have to integrate with law enforcement. And most places, like say for example, like you're in a place where like a jail or something like that you can't get into the basement, then they'll say like, hey, we need you to bring service down here because, coverage sucks. And of course, I've been an RF engineer. I know how hard it is to reach into buildings to begin with, let alone basements, and we have all this software that says, like it's going to be this strong. And then once you get inside the building, it's going to attenuate by this much. So you're going to reduce your signal down to next to no service. So that's why these systems are designed. It's basically because like hospitals, doctors need to get their phone calls, right? They can't be without their phones.
Plus you got all that RF flying around, messing about with the medical equipment.
And there you go. Now you have this soup of, especially in a hospital even, you have Wi-Fi signals, you have public safety signals, you have all this soup of frequencies in there and stuff like that, even with the doctors, At any rate, so this kind of made me think about how troubleshooting is affected with some people, okay? Again, not everybody, but some people. And this is why I think that when we're thinking about the challenges we each face in addressing each other's behavior, and you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm going to bring this up, and I know this is going to be controversial, and it probably won't score me a lot of points with a lot of people, but I feel like it needs to be said. And I think that this is something that would be, I don't know, it'll either resonate with them or not, but there's this band, Run the Jewels. And I don't know if you heard of them. They're a rap group in the States, and I think they're kind of popular over there. They release their albums for free, so if anybody's curious to listen to it, you can just download them for free. I'm not trying to make a commercial here. I'm just saying, like, it's a really good group, and I learn a lot by listening to their songs also. And they have a video called "Close Your Eyes." Again, it's basically this. And I would encourage you to pause this and go watch it, if you want to know what it's about, because I think it's important to this story. But it's basically it's all in black and white, and it's a police officer and an African American male, and they're basically a Caucasian police officer and African American male, and they're basically in this sort of this cycle of fighting with each other, and it seems like they don't understand why. Like there's not any the video doesn't start with any incident, right? You just see them resting after a fight, and then they start fighting, and then they're resting again. It's like this little cycle, right? And what I loved about that was that it has such humanity in understanding these two people, right? Both of them. And what's happening is that a lot of times there's these external issues that we are not fully aware of that are affecting us. And I really feel for a police officer who would be sensitive to these frequencies. Like if you're like me, say there's a guy out there and he's been in that his whole life, and then suddenly like, now he's not only dealing with all this, but then suddenly he's got like radio like right here on his shoulder, right? And that pulse is hitting his head over and over again. Well, then you start, you see what I'm saying? Like there's all these weird kind of things that are happening right now, and you're going like, why did that guy do that? Why did he shoot him, and why did he choke him, and why did that happen to those two guys? And I just don't believe that people are inherently evil. I feel like there's usually a way to troubleshoot their behavior to determine what it is that caused them to feel that way at that time and act out in the way that they did. Now, mind you, that's never an excuse for taking a life, ever. And that's not exactly what I'm saying here at all. Actually, far from it. I just believe that there is a cycle of violence that's occurring within these things where people don't understand each other, and they don't understand why they're looking at another person and seeing something they don't like just instinctually. It's like they can't even control it. And that just makes me sad. And I've seen it happen to myself. And it's weird because I'm telling you, I don't believe that I'm a naturally aggressive person at all. I believe that I'm a peace-loving, warm person at my core. But when I had that mix, I can't say that I've been a pleasant person to be around. I make very bizarre... I'm up and down, and there's times where I'm not nice to even like people in my family, and I have no idea why I was that way. There's people that have been very close to me that I don't even understand why I'm doing it. I understand is all I'm saying. I understand. I feel like I understand this. I feel like this makes sense to me, and that when you have that much frequency surrounding you, no matter who you are, whether you're on whatever the receiving end is, you're in this sort of, like, they just feel like there are these for some people, if they were sensitive to it, you get in this frequency fence and you don't know how to respond to each other anymore. The same way that these patterns start to get disrupted and not form correctly. We're seeing that in our entire society. What I'm suggesting to you is to, like, let's stop thinking about what color they are. Let's stop thinking about that he's an officer and that he's the kid in the street. Let's pull ourselves back, okay? Like we do with this. Let's pull ourselves back and really examine ourselves. Like, look at yourself like you're in the corner of the room, staring down upon yourself. And examine your own behavior, and it'll help you understand other people. And that's why this is such a painful thing for me, and why I believe those guys understand what I'm talking about, who made the video and who made there's a bigger issue. There's a larger problem that we need to figure out, is what I'm saying. And I really believe that. Do I know it? No. But I really want somebody to explore this with me, because I feel like there's so many people that are hurting, and they're hurting each other. We need to figure it out. And I'm a person that I guess you could say, like, hey, how about you study that guy? He used to have a backpack strapped to him with every damn frequency in the world. Like, I'll do it, no problem. It hasn't got me yet, right? So if you want to study me, I'll do it. Seriously, I'll sign up. I don't know what else to do, people. I mean, this is the best that I know how to sort this problem out, I feel like I walked around my whole career feeling like, this doesn't have an effect on me, and believing that it doesn't have an effect on me. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. It certainly feels like it does, And if, as I'm examining myself, I have to give everybody else the same credit. I have to look at everybody else, all the people who, I'm going to give you an example, like the police officer that I talked about in the first one, I don't dislike that guy because I understand there's something else happening, and we're all caught in it. And he's doing his best, and I'm doing my best, and I give him that, and I hope he gives me that. And honestly, as much as there was like this silence in there, I believe that there was an exchange in the subtle energy, and that's the thing that we can't lose, and that's why the honeycomb.
What do you mean by subtle energy? What do you mean by exchange in subtle energy? Why do you use that phrase?
Because of the modulation, right? So sorry. We're talking about this. Now
The
I'm getting
square
interrupted.
waves.
I'm getting interrupted again. This sucks. Okay,
There's
so
other things that you said we'll be
so
doing
you
at
say
the. Yeah.
but you say like zeros and ones, right? I guess what I'm talking about is that sure, in this realm, right, you have the up and down, the zeros and ones, but no matter, regardless of whether or not you see the transition in this pattern, you know, when you look at a binary pattern, regardless of whether or not you see it, sorry, where's my marker? Anyways, in between, there is something happening, right? To
What
get
do you
from
mean
there,
in between? It's
that's the subtle energy. It's something that you can't see, but it has to be there. Otherwise, you could not get from here to here, right? And that's what they keep telling me. Like, you need to remember this whenever you're doing your research. To get from here to here in this pattern, there has to be that.
and of course that's the fundamental digital signal, a square wave. There's lots of
Yeah.
different codes there. They move around. So there's a subtle crossover there you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the subtle energy, right? I
Now,
mean,
that's what you're being told by this.
it facilitates this transition, and when this doesn't happen, then what do you suppose happens? It's the same like when your cable connection times out while you're watching TV and it starts going blah, 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 you know, or when we're having our conversations here and things start to drop out, you know. It's that same dynamic, you know. Something's that's the subtle energy, really, when you get
Now,
down to
is
it.
this
I mean,
what you've been told by the so-called bees?
it's just coming to me, honestly. Like, for me to state
This
this
is
as
very
fact.
important. This is because
Sorry.
others have
Sorry.
come up with
Yeah.
this. A guy called Sheridan in Dublin.
I apologize because I've been doing this for so long that even when I'm sitting inside my own apartment, I do this. I'll start talking out loud. And I feel like actually that I'm going blind right now.
Go ahead. What's
I know why
happening?
that's happening.
What's happening with your eyes? What do you sense?
No, it's weird. And actually, that's the thing that they wanted me to ask for. They said that remember that I'm blind and that what led me to this experience was that I followed the voice that resonated with me. Any voice that resonates with me is the one that I'm drawn to at this point, and that's how I'm finding my own truth, you know. And when I find information, I really start to ask myself, is it resonating, right? And in my mind, I feel like that's sort of like the part that's sort of like this, right? When something's really, they're revving a motorcycle outside. So. When something's resonating, it's sorry.
No, that's fine. Try and describe what's happening when this happens, so we know we can see what.
This is what happens to them in colony collapse. That's what they're telling me. Like, it scrambles their thought patterns. Like, they go, "This is what's happening."
We have to say, just for people watching, we've now got a massive lip sync error.
Like, well, they have a code, right, that they speak in, and it's that Walsh code that's 64 by 64. And that's all. It's a pattern. It's not something I fully understand, but it's just part of the code. Like, it's part of the standard. I'm not telling you anything, woo. It's just, that's, if you look it up online, it'll tell you this. It's Walsh code. And that's part of the CDMA, the Code Division Multiple Access Standard. And so that sort of creates that visual matrix within that Walsh code. And what they're telling me is that when we send it interferes with that thought process, and that's akin, I guess you could say, to what I'm dealing with.
So they're running with a similar code that the networks are running on.
Dude, it's hard for me to even put this together right now. I mean, that's how much it's.
Yeah, well, at the moment you're quite time delayed.
I'm good though. Like, we got to keep going though, because if I don't,
let's go.
I'll totally lose my train. I'm sorry.
Keep going, yeah.
Yeah.
What
but
is
at any
happening
rate,
at
so
that
when
junction, when that
about
subtle energy
why
happens?
that's why they had the misformed honeycombs. When they were doing the.
You had a tri-state code there. You had 3.
Like, this is what happened, right? Instead of getting like a perfectly formed shape, like it would be malformed down here. So when it needed to connect to the next comb, you didn't have that even pattern. So there's the subtle energies destroyed, right? If you can't form the perfect patterns to begin with based on that sacred code that they require, then everything's thrown off. And they said that's what empaths and psychics are dealing with right now. That this same dynamic is what that they will experience, and that's one of the reasons why they wanted me to talk to people about this, so that at least we could talk about ways for maybe, at least testing this theory. That there might be some ways that we can at least talk about it, and I think that would be awesome, because there are things called quiet zones, right?
Which?
And why
The
not?
things
Why
called
not
what?
try it? Why not get a group of people together, right? And say, hey, we're going to go to a quiet zone and we're going to camp there for this much time, and we're going to see how we feel when we're not, when we don't have, emissions from our wall sockets and televisions and cell phone tower signals, and just see what it feels like in a clean environment, and actually take, if it's possible, like even like get down to like biometric data, right? Get down to really like seeing how people's pulses are, what types of inclinations they have, like really make it into a study. That would be interesting to me, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of interest in doing that on an official level. But I think that it's something that anybody could do in the spirit of troubleshooting. I mean, that there's nothing wrong with saying like, hey, let's see if this helps. Let's see if this works for us, and then we
Now,
can share our
before
results.
before I lose the thought, is the honeycomb not being malformed, but being formed into some other pattern?
I've read the study, once, like in detail, and I've like brushed over it a couple other times. But I mean, at the end of the day, this makes total sense to me with the honeycomb, right? I mean, you can't get that perfect pattern that's symmetrical, right, from here to here if this whole bottom is like,
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying? That's all been thrown off, right? So when this is trying to connect perfectly like that, it can't do it. It's doing like angles, right? This is part of their math. This is part of their code. It's looking for, and it's doing these things over and over and over and over again to form that perfect cone. This is, again, I don't know. This is kind of happening.
Yeah.
So if you destroy the symmetry, right, that needs to be extremely symmetrical for them in order to make it to the next one. Otherwise, they can't start forming the next perfect. You see?
Yeah, it won't fit.
If this is mutated, then this is going to go down to here, and then this one's going to form like this, and this is, none of it's, all the shape's going to be thrown off and everything like that. And they go, and that's the problem. Like, there's a lot of people that are, because of adaptation, right? There's bees that are being born that are actually, they have erratic behavior in the minds of like the beekeepers and the handlers, but in all reality, they're actually very high functioning bees, extremely high functioning bees. They just have, they're very sensitive to this, and they're concerned about us because they feel like in our world there's a similar thing happening where there's a lot of kids being born nowadays that are being basically tagged with DSM labels, who are called disabled or something similar to that, when really they're actually highly intelligent, high functioning people, and specifically like autism and AD, whatever they're calling it, AD. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be straight up with you guys. I'm gonna share, if is this okay to talk about. I know we're talking about honeycombs and everything else like that, but I can tell you how this affected my honeycomb. So I did see psychiatrists like a few years ago, right, when I was doing my my follow-up, I guess, when I started experiencing these things again. But about a year prior to that, I'd been seeing a different set of psychiatrists, like maybe like 2 years prior, that introduced me to medication. Okay, and so I'm just going to share this with you, even though it's kind of personal.
Well, this is going to go out.
What's that?
This is, you're going to go out to a.
Yeah, so I don't mind giving you the chronology, I guess. It was around my form of colony collapse was losing somebody really close to me. Sorry. I can't get into this right now. I got to talk about the okay.
You're in
My
charge. You're in.
my
Do
form of
whatever it
colony
feels
collapse
okay
was
for you.
basically that my work wasn't doing well when I lost her, and I got on that. I went to a psychiatrist because, like, I was feeling depressed. Again, it's the same dynamic. The same way I feel depressed here is the reason why they can't form a comb. I can't do my job. They can't form a comb. It's analogous, and that's what they're telling me. And they sorry, man, this is really tough. It's I'm getting blocked. I'm sorry.
What's happening?
I'm just getting blocked, and
What are you trying to say?
my form of colony collapse sort of occurred when I lost this person, right? Because this had a lot to do with something I was trying to, when this code, so like if I'm sensitive to the same way that bees are, and I reach a person who's not as, they have a lot more abilities than I do, right? And that's the way she was to me, I guess. She was sort of like that bee that was that highly functioning, really understood all these things. And I think that she saw that in me as well, that we were both these very, but she didn't see that I saw it in myself. Let me put it that way. And that really frustrated her. And it was very aggravating for her to witness, because I don't think she understood the technical issue like I did, because I didn't understand the technical issue either. It's not till just now, through all this troubleshooting, that I really figured out that this frequency issue was big for me at the time, and it did affect things. And so, of course, what do, right? Rather than thinking about what my frequencies are, because all day long I'm around them, so they become normal to me, right? I'm like, this is normal. This is normal. And I forget about it. And I don't think about that as being a dynamic. So what do? I go to the doctor and go, I'm depressed. Doctor says, all right, here's a pill. They put you on antidepressant. It doesn't work. It will for maybe a little bit. You might feel like a little sensation in your neck, and you start go, but when you get down to it, again, I'm not giving medical advice here, okay? I'm just saying from my own personal experience, I can't see anything that I achieved on one of those drugs that I couldn't have achieved on my own. And I had this really good friend and again, talking about like fucking up relationships because you have issues. I had a good friend of mine, and he once told me, there's no cure for life, dude. And he would say it over and over again, hey man, there's no cure for life. I mean, like anytime when I first started investigating medication, that's the first thing he said to me, and I wish I would have listened to him, because it's a total mistake. All it does is, if you're inclined to create beautiful patterns completely independently, all it does is sync you up to that false clock that you don't need to be on. If that's not you, don't try to sync up to that clock. That's all I'm going to tell you. Don't sync to the clock if it's not where you're supposed to be. And that's the thing about her, is that she knew that that's a possibility. She knew that we could live our lives that way if I just stopped pretending that I had to function at this level where I made a shit ton of money and could do all these awesome things. And of course, that's what my brain's telling me. Why? Because I got this, you're like the Devo song, Smart Patrol, Mr. DNA, right? Like suburban robot that monitors reality. That's how I felt. Like I'm just common stock. We work around the clock, like that song just sticks in my head because it's that pattern. Common stock, work around the clock, You just get that idea in your head that that's what you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be doing, and it sucks because you lose out on so much. And I lost her, so that's the thing. And it's my fault. I pushed her away because that's what my programming told me to do. And
what do you mean your programming told you to do that? Why were you programmed to do that? What programmed you?
Still trying to figure that out. When I say programming, I think that this is why I like. This is another thing about Anton Wilson that I like, where he says that what we're fighting right now, this battle that we're in, is I'm sorry, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's a battle between the ones who want to self-program and the ones that want to program us, right? And then there's some people that are completely okay with the programming, right? They're cool with it. They're fine, and that works for them. But then there's other people that are just like, they don't want it. But then that leads me back when I'm troubleshooting it, like, how do you even know that those people truly want to be programmed if they're already programmed? You see, how do you know? And then so that's why
Have you
we get
checked?
back.
One way of doing it is sense of humor.
What's that?
A sense of humor.
Yeah.
When people lose their sense of humor,
I did. Like, dude, that's the other thing about this, and I actually tell you, like, sometime right around the time around 2004. Okay, I lived in a basement duplex. All right, and I actually made music and recorded it. So in my own mind, when I'm thinking through, like, my own creativity and things like that, it seemed like when I started, like, moving upward and, like, living in apartments that were, whatever, that's when everything started to go downhill. And but then I was very creative. Like, I have, dude, I got over here, they're not even connected right now. I got drum machines and synthesizers and samplers, and I love tinkering with that stuff at my heart. It's at my core. I love to do that. But this shit's not even connected. And I'm getting there. I feel like it, at least. I have ideas, but I couldn't even get the idea in my head, When for me, when it's that close to me, I just don't form creative ideas. They just think I'll get a spark briefly, and then it's gone. It is gone as fast as I got it, and I can't hold on to it. So all I have really are these very rare moments where I, like, write down an idea, and then I can never expand upon it because I just feel like I've placed myself in this sort of frequency prison. I did it to myself with my condition. So all I'm trying to do is, like, chip away at the layers of my personal frequency prison the best that I can in the process of this troubleshooting.
Well, you can rebuild that backwards.
Yeah, it's reverse engineering.
Yeah.
And that's at the root of everything. Because let me tell you something, dude. This is why I know that I connect with these other people that I'm talking about who are experiencing this. My nephew is a lot like me. Both of them I share things in common with. But the really odd part is my sister, who's, we don't share the same blood, right? She's Korean, but her son, Christian, I'm telling you, that kid, it's almost like he's mine. Like as if he took on my personality traits. There's things about him where he does impressions. Like I used when I was a kid, I mimicked people all the time. Like, I did dead-on impressions of all kinds of different characters, and I almost had an uncontrollable compulsion to do it. And sometime that even now, I don't do it like I used to. But again, it's starting, right? I'm starting to do impressions. I'm starting to get my sense of humor back. But I really had to chip away at these layers and reverse engineer this problem the same way I had to do that to my brain. And that's really what we're dealing with here. It's approaching your brain as a complicated. It's a machine with cycles and magnets, and it does operate a similar, like the way we have networks here. Don't always assume that your left and your right are 100% merged, and don't always assume that your frontal is merged with your other hemispheres. You see, these sometimes you lose sync, right? Meaning in order for these things to work together and stuff like that, they have to be on this common cycle or a common algorithm. And if they lose track of that, maybe that's my problem. Maybe the reason why I lose thoughts here all the time is because I've been so isolated. I don't have conversations this long, Miles, really. I don't talk to anybody longer than I have to. And when you try to talk to me for like a half hour, seriously, aside from a couple really close relatives, that's it for me. I don't talk to people, man. That's how much I have shut myself off from the world. And this experience is like making me go, no.
Okay, let's try and build on this in the last section. How can we deal with this? What is telling you about this? What solutions? Where do we pick up this and start trying to fix the wiring?
Well,
let's treat this as a fault condition in the system.
What they said was that it would be beneficial to go see how bees thrive in quiet zones. And when I say quiet zones, I'm talking about, or see whether or not, I should say, excuse me, it's a hypothesis. But they told me that if we go there, we'll see. If we see a quiet zone, we'll see it, and we need to look. And if we find something that works for the bees, what we need to do is find people who can work with them, because what they're telling me is that people who work well with bees And if there's not frequency interruption, that they'll have a much more harmonious connection to the beekeepers. And if their patterns are disrupted, it's hard for them even to understand why they react to their beekeepers. You know, sometimes they understand that they're just reaching in there and trying to lift up, and they don't understand why, because that signal's hitting them, right? It's just hitting them, and they know that it's cool because this is the keeper that they like, right? They like this guy. They think he's cool. But, you know, there's something
this
about...
is fascinating because, as I say, my father was a beekeeper, so I can completely understand what you're talking about.
And we're the same way, right? If we're disrupted in that same way and we share similar things in common with some of these bees, then we can study this in conjunction with them. And that's the thing that I feel like, that's something I would do. Like if they said, hey man, you want to go hang out in a quiet zone where there's bees and see how well, you know, like I would just go see if I could like hang out with them, right?
Maybe we've got to find out, is there some way we can communicate with these intelligences, these animal kingdom intelligences? You're getting some kind of download, you're getting some kind of disruption as well.
Yeah.
Can you figure out the problem, work the problem like you did in your job?
What they told me was that, you know, there's this connection between them. They said they wanted me to think about repeaters inside my business, right? And that when I'm using a repeater, meaning these things that bring signal from, like, I'm sorry, I didn't really explain that very well, did I? The repeaters, like when we talk about those systems. Excuse me, let me use this.
In other words, the repeater receives the signal and then transmits it back out again, more powerfully, but on a different frequency.
Yeah, so like you would put like an antenna on the rooftop, bring the cable down in there, you have this little repeater, right? And then it broadcasts a signal. But here's the thing, like these things in and of themselves, they would be harmonious, except the problem is that this thing here has this path, right? That's transmit and receive, right? And you need those levels, depending on what type of modulation you're using or whatever, they need to be at a certain level to be optimized. And for example,
in other words, so one doesn't feed back into the other.
What's that?
So your transmit doesn't.
Because you have oscillation, you know, like, and so like in repeaters, if they're out of balance, it's sort of like in music when you saw like like Jimi Hendrix or Kurt Cobain or something like that. They would, you know, take the guitar and put it up against the amplifier and go, or they like kind of hang it back, you know, and create that. Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, if these aren't balanced properly with the right modulation scheme, they can totally throw everything off balance, right? And so, like, for example, like if it was LTE, you would want the signal to be, if I remember correctly, neg 92, okay? And what happens is that the transmit and the receive have to be at a certain level. So you measure the signal coming in here, it goes down here, you lose part of that signal from all the coaxial cable and the loss from the antenna, so that when you get here, the reason why it's called a bidirectional amplifier is because now it has to take this signal that it's, you know, reduced from all this cable and pump it out to the antenna inside the building, okay? And to do that, you have to have a balanced transmit and receive path. And they say that's analogous to communication in not just their relationships, but our own, you see. They have to have that balance in the transmit and receives path, otherwise everything's thrown off. The same way we can't balance a system without a good balance of transmit and receive. You can't, you know, all these things are completely thrown off without balance. And so a large part of what I did was balance these systems.
Well, that means you must have had some kind of intuition.
To do that, start thinking about those things a little bit more. I'm sorry?
It means you would have had some kind of intuition about that subtlety. Did you have that subtle intuition? Why did they start communicating with you?
And this is the thing, like, and they told me there's a reason why that number has been that way, and I feel weird about saying it, but it's just that number is relevant to the person that I was telling you about earlier. And over again, and even before the codex, that number was appearing constantly. And I told you, I won't say it out loud, Miles, but I told you, you know, privately that number connected to you too. So I thought it was really, and it's connected to this person I'm telling you about, you know. And it appeared in balancing these systems. I would see the number over and over again, and it made me think over and over again. And it's been like torture in my head, thinking, God, you know, we just we didn't have, we lost that. We lost the subtle energy. We lost our balance. And if we had been able to somehow balance our systems without any interference, I think everything would have been okay. And getting on that topic, sometimes these systems, they don't stay balanced because you might get interference inside the path of the antenna. And so sometimes, for example, like you might be, so maybe the building next door, for example, they might have a similar system pointing this way, right? And it's doing, transmit, receive, and whatever and stuff like that. Well, if this one is working on the same frequencies as these, it can interfere with this system. And what happens when that happens is both these signals are so distorted and out of path, like there's no harmony there, right? There's not. It's just and it's noise. And what happens is that your data rate, okay, because I'm talking about systems where you're transmitting data back and forth. Your data rate goes way down when that happens. So like if you have a perfectly balanced system, you might get 29 megabytes per second, right? But if it's not balanced, it's like down in the dirt. Like you're getting, you're not even getting 1 megabyte per second. You see, that's all it takes to throw off your data rate. Now, what's tricky about that is when you're looking at your phone in these scenarios, your phone will show a full signal, but for some reason, your data rate is slow. Like, so it's not always about how strong your signal is, and that's part of it. Yeah, you can have the most incredibly strong signal in the world, right? It could be like constantly radiating and humming and buzzing and everything like that, the best signal in the world. But if the balance is off and you have interference coming from an external source, there is absolutely, and especially if it's riding on the same frequency that you naturally are on, it's going to completely interfere with all signals, and it's going to cause that system to do one of the things. It's either going to increase, if it has auto gain, it'll just increase the gain on the system, which is sort of like, I guess the best way I describe it is like going to your relative's house and everybody's having a conversation like during, the holidays, and you might have one on one corner of the room having a conversation with a person in the kitchen, the television's on, then you got two people shouting across the other conversation. It's just noise. And what are they all doing? They're raising their voice. Because as the power starts to increase, and this is like the same way as everybody's talking in the room, right? Well, that's sort of like the way our communication patterns are. Even in the subtle energy between one another, the same way the bees require that subtle energy to form perfect combs, that when you have that interference, the system will shut down. And actually, this is true. Like these repeaters, if you have enough of this external interference, these things have an automatic protection mechanism that'll actually say, "Hey, buddy, that's too much of the wrong signal. Now you're shutting down." And boom, the signal just goes dead and the equipment shuts off. And then only once it gets the proper receive signal will the repeater come back on. And that's sort of like, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's, they're experiencing that same type of interference with their communication patterns. And they're trying to tell us, like, sometimes everything's cool, but because there's other hive over here that's right next to us and everything like that, that's communicating on identical patterns. It's confusing everything in our hive, and we can't. They're jamming their natural communication patterns between each other. So yeah. Well, that's the thing. So some can adapt, right? And that's the thing. So that's why I say this is sort of like why they're telling me that they want me to talk about this, because, yeah, some can adapt, but some really cannot adapt. And is it fair to say that because some can adapt, that that's more important than the ones who can't adapt? And that's how they feel. What's that? Well, part of the reason why they can't adapt is because in order for them to evolve, they need these natural communication patterns to be not disrupted. They have to be naturally flowing, And if they're not naturally flowing, then they can't form the combs. They can't communicate between each other. They're not going to be able to.
Run out of bandwidth.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to. Yeah, it reduces their bandwidth precisely. Thank you. That's the best.
We're basically jamming these creatures with these signals, and they can't live.
What'll trick you about this scenario is that in the building scenario is that your phone will be really really strong on signal, but your data rate will be
Yeah.
nothing.
Well, it's
No.
like shooting in a satellite signal. If the quality of the signal isn't there, you're going to get
Yeah.
a signal but no quality.
Yep. Yep. It's a bit error rate.
So they're able to communicate with you to tell you.
Yeah, but unfortunately, it's very harsh on me because I'm experiencing. Here's the deal. I think the reason why it sort of comes in and out, and the reason why I hear this sound in my ear, is yeah. So
What is the sound? Can you give us any indication what that's like?
It's because sometimes the engine stops, and that's the bee being transferred from one colony to the next and feeling really really scared. And when it's scared as it's happening and stuff, and the truck's moving around, see, it's just like I feel now. I just feel like I'm going like this, and I'm just trying to I'm trying to hold it together.
Tuning in. So they're telling you what it's like.
Yeah, they're making me experience it. They're forcing me to experience what they experience, so I know what it feels like. They're not going to stop until I figure this out.
We have to find a solution to this.
Yeah,
and they've chosen you. Because you're an RF engineer in this.
They're telling me is that I'll never have
a way into.
I'm sorry?
They find a way to tell us this. So we've got an open channel here. Let's try and develop this form of communication to see what they can tell us. Is there any way you can communicate back to them?
No, but I just feel them. They can't talk back to me. I can just feel it. All I'm feeling is that damn truck idling, and they're traumatized. They're really, really traumatized. So I'm getting a signal. I mean, I'm sensing something.
You're getting emotion from them. Okay.
Like, that's the problem. Okay, that's it. That's the problem. It's like it requires, when they're talking to me, it's because they're in a traumatic state. They're traumatized. That's the only way. That's the reason why they're breaking through. And they would be able to help a lot more if they weren't traumatized.
Interspecies communication here. So let's put a shout out for people who can somehow get this message across to the frequency planners at the FCC that they're jamming and causing physical harm to life on this planet, and there's certain frequencies they've got to get the hell off.
Yeah, and actually I'm glad because I didn't mention that earlier about the Schumann resonance. One of the reasons why I'm connected to that song, The Sweet Love for Planet Earth, and it actually has some really interesting lyrics that I never read until just like a few days ago. I've never understood them because it's just a guy screaming into a Fisher-Price microphone. That's really all it is. And but then when you read the words out, you're thinking to yourself, wow, this guy must be in touch with something, because this must be precisely how the Earth feels right now. We're running, people like, I don't have a whole lot of experience in this, so I'd have to ask somebody else. But
okay,
I know that
we've got 8 minutes left. Let's just get your bottom line across now.
You have like the elf waves and things like that affect the Earth in that realm. So, I mean, that's something that when I listen to this song, I really get this strong sense of that being disruptive. And this is a lot of things about not chopping down trees. I don't know what those tell you. I know that sounds kind of whatever, but they just don't want us to chop down trees. They say they want us to find something else to do it with.
Because it's an energy change. I mean, this is what Valerie Urarov.
Yeah, no, they're actually, that was something that was in my codex. There's in my codex, like when I was driving, I was listening to two songs a lot, and I started getting this pattern going in my head, and this helped me perform this. I would call this almost like the audio alchemical transfer that created the subtle energy in me that allowed me to drive. You know, that's the only. I know it sounds like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but it makes sense to me now. I probably would have said whatever to somebody who said that to me, like, you know, a few months ago, but now that makes total sense to me.
Something to do with the subtle
And the
energy
way
of
I
the
did
digital
it,
waveform.
I'm sorry.
The
What's
subtle
that?
energy, the subtle signal.
Well, I basically crossfaded two songs together. I took The Bells by Lowell and Animal Collective's Floridada, and I just synced them up. And there was something about the way the two songs sounded together that made me think of, and like the word marshmallow popped in my head, and then something else, and then that started to decrypt like into, and I wrote it somewhere in my codex. Like, I don't want to like look through my book right now and find it, but it said basically that word separates out to the Mars hum will allow awake, marshmallow, Mars hum will allow awake. And they were making me, the reason why I came up with that is as those two songs crossfaded, they wanted me to think about this place called Wallowa Lake, and it's in Oregon. And I don't know why. I still need to look into that, but they wanted me to like figure something out about Wallowa Lake in Oregon. And that's a place that my family vacationed. Actually, that makes sense to me. My family vacationed there a number of times while my nephew was growing up, my brother's kid, and I never made it to any of those because I was always working or finding something else to do aside from being with my family. And I really regret that. And I'm so glad that was a little message that was delivered to me, because what I wound up doing was integrating this into this little song. And again, you know, I talk about that you have to perform a frequency hack on your own brain sometimes to get you back in place. Like you've been teaching me things, Miles. This is something that helped me. By putting these two songs together, you had those isochronic, you know, fields we were talking about, and it just created this perfect frequency inside me where I was able to balance things out. And I have to remember to always come back to that as many times as I can, because that was such a beautiful lesson to learn. And I kept on saying, I know I'm going to look like a dork here, but I'm going to do it. I would sit there like this with the steering wheel, you know, as I'm driving down the road. Don't worry, I didn't have my eyes closed, but I would go like, you know, Mars, Mars, hum, hum, will allow awake. Mars, 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 hum, hum, will allow awake. Mars, 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 hum, hum, will allow awake. And I started thinking about Native Americans and the Hopis and that connection between the Hopi Indians and Silicon Valley, you know. And what I was learning from this, and again, I this seemed like it was the bees are saying like that effectively. God, I'm getting interrupted. This kills me. That effectively that
We'll have to end it very soon. We've got about 2 minutes left.
I'm sorry. Yeah. They said that it's just this. It creates a perfect pattern for me, and that I need to like always come back to that perfect pattern so that I know how to sync back up my clock, and that things will be okay, and that a lot of things that I've had to adapt to, this will help sort of like fill in the gap a little bit until I'm able to sort of sort out, I don't know what you call it, you know, it's something that's going to help me until I can figure out the larger problem. It's something that'll keep me back in sync, that'll help me understand the subtle energy and help me remember the things that I could have been doing when I was staying in sync with the clock, you know? And this song is just a nice little, I don't know. It's hard to describe for me, man. It's a kind of a personal thing.
It's helping, but we're going to have to wind it up, part 4.
It just made me think about that person in my life, because there's times where, like, you know, the other number that kept on appearing to me was my birth date, okay? And on my birthday one year, I made the decision to go to a damn company function instead of spending it with her, and that's all she wanted from me was for me to spend my damn birthday with her, and I didn't do it. And I'm an asshole for that.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I love all the work you're doing. I really appreciate, and I think that it's very important. And
Time's running out. Let's get, if there's anybody out there who can help with this in interspecies communication with the animals, knowing that we're dealing with a frequency codec system which is causing a lot of problems to other species and it's affecting us.
What we need is an interfrequency hard handoff, for the world, right? We just need to give each other a lot of interfrequency hard handoffs and help us get from one point to the other, and that's what we should be.
Evolved to communicate with us to say this, that we're creating a problem. This other species, the bees or this animal kingdom has evolved.
Yes.
That's it. We're out of time. I'm going to pack up and go to the International UFO Congress. Exciting. In Phoenix. So I'll be in the same time zone as you tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.